Hello everyone, welcome to Easy Economics. How are you all doing? I hope you all are doing good. Well, today I brought for you all Mid-June 2025 paper series 2281 and 0455 variant 11. Today we'll be doing another MCQ paper. Let's quickly dive into the paper and see what this paper has brought for us today. Moving towards MCQ number 1. MCQ number 1 says, what is likely to increase the occupational mobility of labor? Option A says increasing entry requirements to professions. B says increasing retraining of workers. C says introducing job specialization. And D says introducing subsidized transport. Now the aim is to increase the occupational mobility of labor. It cannot be D because D is talking about geographical mobility. It cannot be A because A is restricting the supply. Similarly, it cannot be C because C is focusing on specialization. Therefore, the correct answer for MCQ number 1 is option B, which is talking about increasing retraining of workers. That means improving the skill set. Therefore, in order to boost the occupational mobility of labor, retraining of workers is highly essential. So for MCQ number 1, we'll shade in B as the correct answer. MCQ number 2. MCQ number 2 says Sonia owns a takeaway delivery service. She decides to expand the firm, buying more vans and hiring additional drivers. Which factors of production were changed? So now if she initially owned a food delivery service and now she aims to expand her services by buying more vans and hiring more workers. So the factors of production that are now being added are increased labor and increased capital. Therefore, both of these point towards option B. So for 2, we'll shade in option A, which is capital and labor, because B talks about capital and land. It's not land, it's capital and labor. So for MCQ number 2, we'll shade in A as the correct response. MCQ number 3. MCQ number 3 talks about a PPC curve. It says the economy is using all of its available resources. That means it has to be somewhere on the PPC, right? Now, a government decides to encourage more production of manufactured goods instead of agricultural goods. So now if the government decides to produce and focus more on manufactured goods instead of agriculture goods, which movement would be depicted by this policy change? So if initially it was on the PPC and now the government decides to produce more of manufactured goods, so this means we need to move towards the vertical axis, which is displaying the manufactured goods. So let's switch from agriculture to manufactured goods. If we were on the PPC, this means we will be moving from X to W, right? Because this means what? This means giving up of agriculture goods in order to produce more of manufactured goods. So this much of agriculture goods would be given up in order to produce this much of manufactured goods. So movement from X to W, this means option C. So we will shade in C as the correct response for MCQ number 3. Moving forward, MCQ number 4. MCQ number 4 says in 2020, to prevent the spread of a pandemic, many governments temporarily closed restaurants and cafes. What could be a macroeconomic impact of such a policy? This means what happened at the aggregate level to the economy when certain restaurants or such restaurants and cafes got closed. Yes, the output level of the economies shrank, right? The output level reduced, right? This means what? The GDP fell. So for 4, it has to be option B. Number 5. Good weather results in an increase in the demand for and supply of peaches. How will this affect the price and quantity traded in the market for peaches? So now if the weather was favorable, so more of peaches were produced. So the supply of peaches rose. If the supply of features rose, similarly, they also say that the demand of features also rose. So this means what? This means that the trading or the quantity of features traded rose. So what we can do is we'll chop A and we'll chop C because they both talk about a fall or an uncertainty in the price, in the quantity of features traded. So we'll chop A and C. So it has to be a rise. But what about the price of features? We do not know anything about the equilibrium price, neither do we not know how the interaction of the demand and the supply forces would have impacted the price level. So yes, the price of peaches was uncertain. However, the quantity of peaches traded had risen. So therefore, for MCQ number 5, we'll shade in D as the correct response. I hope this is clear. Moving forward, MCQ number 6. Now, MCQ number 6 displays us demand and supply diagrams, demand and supply curves for a product at its equilibrium price P. So this is the initial equilibrium, where S is the supply curve and D is the initial demand curve. And let's label this as E, initial equilibrium. Vertical axis displays the price and the horizontal axis displays the quantity. Now, what's the question asking? How would the introduction of a subsidy be shown? If a subsidy is given, we all know that the supply curve would shift. The supply curve would shift outwards towards the right. So if initially the supply curve was S, now the new supply curve would be S2. However, we would be on the same demand curve. So keeping on the same demand curve, this would be the new equilibrium now. Let's call it E1. They are saying how would the introduction of a subsidy be shown? There would be no change in the demand curve. So we can chop A, we can chop B. Supply would shift to S2. This is what we've done. So the correct answer is D. So for 6, we'll shade in D. Number 7. Number 7 says the table shows the quantity demanded at different prices. Now what they've done is they have given us a table. They've listed a price, different prices of a product. And it was at $6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and the quantity that was demanded at each price. Now the thing for which fall in price is the demand price inelastic. Now price inelastic means that a change in price is not bringing any change or very little change in quantity demanded, right? So meaning no change at all. It's not that responsive. The demand is not responsive to price changes. Now they're saying which price change would show you that the demand is price inelastic. So for this, we'll do the working. Option A says from $6 to $5. So now what we'll do is we'll calculate the PED at each level and we'll determine the value of PED in each case in order for us to determine whether it is price elastic or price inelastic. Alright, let's work it out. Option A says from $6 to $5. So now if it's from 6 to 5, we know that in order to calculate PED, it has to be percentage change in quantity demanded upon percentage change in price, right? So the percentage change in quantity demanded, that would be 4 minus 3 upon 3, that's initial, into 100. So in the numerator, the percentage change in quantity demanded should be 33.3%. And the percentage change in price, which is 5 minus 6 upon 6, that's initial, into 100, would give you 16.67. So you would be getting a PED value of 2 for option A. Similarly, when you calculate for B, in the numerator, you would be getting a 25 for the percentage change in quantity demanded. For percentage change in price, you will be getting a 20. And when you calculate it, so the PED value you would be getting would be a 1.25. For C, when they are talking about from 4 to 3, you subtract a 7. From 5, you'll get 2. So 2 upon 5 into 100, the numerator value should be 40. And the denominator should be 3 minus 4 upon 4 into 100. So the denominator you would be getting would be a 25. So once you divide the numerator by the denominator, the percentage change in quantity demand is divided by the percentage change in price. The PED value you would be getting would be a 1.6. Finally, for option D, from $3 to $2, it would be 9 minus 7, 2 upon 7 into 100. So the numerator value you would be getting would be a 28.57. Divided by the denominator value, the percentage change in price is 33.3%. And it would yield you a PED of 0.857, a 0.86, 0.86. So if you look at the value, this is where it's less than 1. So this is showing PED is price inelastic. So for 7, it has to be D. So we'll shade in D as the correct response. You need to calculate it and then you'll arrive at the correct answer. All right. MCQ number 8. MCQ number 8 says the price elasticity of supply of coffee is calculated as 0.2, a positive, for the current year and 2 in the long run. Now they're saying, why is the price elasticity of coffee higher in the long run? So now you see supply is price inelastic in short run. It needs time to grow and respond to changes in price. It cannot be B. It cannot be C. Why? Because they are all talking about related to price elasticity of demand, right? Similarly, D is also irrelevant. So because coffee plants take several years to grow, so for MCQ number 8, the correct answer is A. MCQ number 9. What would a person believe who wished to encourage the use of market system? A says people should have equal living standards. B says people should have freedom of action. C says profit maximization is wrong. D says the government should correct people's bad behavior. It cannot be D, because if you're talking about market mechanism, if you're talking about market economy, you need to believe in price or consumer, you need to believe in consumer sovereignty, right? You need to believe that people should have freedom of action, right? So for MCQ number 9, B is the correct answer. People should have living standards. No, there's a lot of income disparity in market economy, so it cannot be A. Profit maximization is wrong. Market economy is denominated by the aim of profit maximization, right? Everybody intends to do what is best or looks forward for their own self-interest. It cannot be C even. So the correct answer by elimination and both by logic is B. So for 9, we've shaded in B. Number 10. What is not a form of money? Now this MCQ is actually discounted. Why? Because it's incorrectly given in 2 answers. What is a form of money? You see, coin is a form of money and banknotes are a form of money. So you chop A and C. But a check and credit card, they both are what? They both are instruments to facilitate, right? They are instruments which facilitate our transactions. But money is what? It's a medium of exchange. So it cannot be B and it cannot be D as well. That is why they have actually discounted this MCQ, right? So B and D both were the correct answers. Alright, 11 says if interest rates fall, what will be the most likely effect on savings and borrowing? So if interest rates are falling, so savings would be discouraged. Why? Because you are getting less returns. And borrowings would increase. Why? Because it's getting cheap, right? So the borrowing should increase. So you can chop A and C because they're all talking about D, decrease. So it either has to be A or it either has to be C, D or B, because they're both talking about an increase of borrowing. But when we talk about saving, we said that yes, savings would be discouraged. So we want a decrease in saving and an increase in borrowing. So It has to be B. Alright, MCQ number 12. MCQ number 12 says a bus driver initially works longer hours if the wage rate increases. So now what it was doing was that the higher it was earning, the more it was working. But then what happened? As his earnings increased, there came a point where he preferred more leisure than extra work. So there came a point where he was no longer motivated to put in more hours into work, right? He was satisfied with whatever range or point of income he was earning. Now they're saying which supply curve represents this situation. Now they're saying which supply curve is an actual representation of his behavior. Now it cannot be A and it cannot be D. S is perfectly inelastic in D, right? So it cannot be D. Similarly, it cannot be A because it's showing that as the wage rate is increasing, it's keeping on working more. But the situation or the scenario they have shown is depicting the other scenario. So you'll chop A and D at that moment only. Now you're left with only two options, B or C. What are they saying? They're saying at a point came where he stopped putting in more hours. If you look at C, what's happening? The wage rate was growing and he was putting in more hours, but then came a point where the curve bent. So now you see the wage rate is increasing, but then look at the amount of hours. Is it increasing? No, it's C. But what's happening in B? I know C is the correct answer. We'll shade in C for 12. But then why it can't be B? Because you see, if you look at B, the wage rate is continuously increasing and so are the working hours, right? It has to be C because at this, after this point, it stopped putting in more hours, right? So it has to be C. Number 13. What is a function of a trade union? What's a function of a trade union? To negotiate workers' contracts, to promote workers to more responsible jobs, to recruit workers for the firm, to supervise the workers in the firm. It cannot be B, it cannot be C because they are both functions of the management, right? Uh, Trade unions are responsible for bargaining power of employees. They protect workers' interests, right? And they provide them job security and negotiate on their behalf of their members in the form of holidays and promotions, right? Uh, so they negotiate workers' contracts. So for 13, it has to be A. Number 14. There has been an improvement in the transport infrastructure in India because of which the cost of farming fell. So now, since there was an improvement in the transport infrastructure, the cost of production of farming fell. Another thing, this is an example of what? So this brings an advantage. So it cannot be diseconomies. So wherever the word diseconomy is written, you just chop it off that moment only. It has to be what? External economies of scale. Why? Because it's an external benefit that caused the farming cost to fall, right? So the farming sector benefited from the improvement in infrastructure. Therefore, it's an external economies of scale. External economies means you are benefiting from an advantage in which you were neither involved in the production nor in the consumption of a product, right? Third party, right? Third party advantages. So for 14, it has to be B. All right, number 15. A firm chooses to become more capital intensive. That means a firm relies to become more automated and less dependent on labor, right? It's less labor intensive, more on dependent on capital, machinery and equipment. What is least likely to have increased, right? So now let's look at the option. Interest rates, minimum wages, power of trade unions, productivity of capital. B, C and D all must have risen. They all must have risen. That is why you switch towards what? Capital intensive. Minimum wages must have rose. That is why you decided now to become automated. Or the power of trade unions must have risen to such an extent that you forced to adopt automated power plants. Productivity of capital must have improved. That is why you decided to think about using more of machines. Why? Because now more output, less unit of input, productivity has improved. It cannot be interest rates, because if interest rate would have increased, you would not have been able to buy machinery, right? So it has to be A. So by logic and both Y, elimination has shown that for 15 it has to be A. Because if interest rates would have risen, machines costs would have been higher, right? Because it would have been costlier for you to import those machines, right? It would have been nearly impossible. All right. MCQ number 16. MCQ number 16 displays the average total cost curve and the average fixed cost curves. It shows the costs on the vertical axis, and the horizontal axis displays the output. Now they're saying which statement is correct. Now let's look at the options. B says at output Y, total variable costs are greater than total fixed costs. Now the diagrams are showing average costs. So it cannot be B because it's talking about total fixed costs. Similarly, it cannot be C because again it's talking about total fixed costs. We'll show B and C at that moment only. Now let's look at D. D says between outputs W and Y, average variable costs have not changed. Now let's look at average variable cost. Average total cost between W and Y, this was the average total cost, this was the average total cost, this was the average fixed cost, this was the average fixed cost. The difference between the average total cost and the average fixed cost is what? Average variable cost. So it must have changed between W and Y. But they are saying it did not change, so you chop D. So B, C and D by elimination is chopped. This means you are left with A. Now let's look at the logic YA. A says at output X, average variable costs are lower than average fixed cost. At, at output X. Now let's look at output X. This is X. At X, they say average variable cost. Now what is average variable cost and average fixed cost? Average fixed cost is how much? Average fixed cost is hovering around 7 million. Average total cost is almost a 10 million. So average total cost is $10 million. Average fixed cost is 7. So the difference between them would be average variable cost, which is $3 million. Now they're saying average variable cost was lower. Yes, average variable cost is 3. Average fixed cost is 7. That's true. The variable cost is less. Average variable cost is less than the average fixed cost. That's true. So for 16, we'll shade in A. I hope this is clear. 18. What is the macroeconomic aim of a government? High external cost, high sales tax, low unemployment, low wages. A, B, D are all microeconomic topics. Macroeconomic aims, talking about the totality, talking about aggregates. It's unemployment. So for 17, we'll shade in C. 18. What is the principle of taxation? What's the principle of taxation? Taxation says that fairness or proportion of tax falls equally on everybody. So fairness between the taxpayers. So for 18, we'll shade in B. 19. Monetary policy often involves a change in which variables? We know monetary policy talks about money supply and interest rates, right? So let's look at the option government expenditure or taxes. That's what? It's fiscal policy. Interest rates or money policy, money supply? Exactly. So for 19, it's B. Number 20. Which supply side measure is most likely to enable a government to achieve its aim of full employment? We know supply side measures aim to increase the aggregate supply, right? Productive potential of the economy. But they're saying which supply side policy is most likely will help a government to achieve full employment level? A, B, and C. A says decreasing government spending on school buildings. B says decreasing the number of teachers in schools. And C says increasing taxation on private school fees. These all are discouraging or reducing the employment level in some way or the other. They are discouraging. It's only D which is increasing the provision of enterprise skills in schools, right? Which is going to promote the level of employment level, aiming at full employment level, improving employment level and reducing unemployment. So for 20, it has to be D. Number 21. Which policy decision is most likely to cause economic growth? Now, which policy would improve the level of productive potential of the economy? An increase in corporation tax rate? No, that would discourage people from working. Corporation tax means you are taxing profits of a company. They will no longer expand. An increase in interest rates? Again, if you're going to increase interest rates, people are not going to expand. An increase in the government's regulations for starting a new business? Again, you're going to make life difficult for people, new entrants, you're going to discourage them. So you'll show up A, B, and D. We're left with C. C says an increase in the amount workers can earn before paying income tax? Yes. So for 21, it has to be C. 22. A government uses the labor force survey method to calculate unemployment. Labor force survey method count people as unemployed if they are without a job and they have been actively seeking for employment in the past month, right? So looking at the definition, this means they are actively seeking work, yes. Immediately available for work, yes. So it has to be a yes and a yes. And eligible for unemployment benefits, no. So looking at the definition for 22, it has to be B. Keep your definitions intact and you will be good to go. 23. What is most likely to rise when the level of employment falls in a high income economy? So they are saying what? They are saying that when unemployment rises, so when unemployment rises, what increases? So when unemployment rises, government expenditure increases. Government will be spending more on the provision of unemployment benefits. So for 23, it has to be B. 24. Consumer price index consists of 4 items. The table shows the percentage price change for each item over a period and the weight. Which price change will affect the level of the CPI most? We will multiply each of the price changes into the weight and we'll get 15% for A, we'll get 12% for B, we'll get 12% for C, we'll get 4% for D. They are asking us for the most or the highest price change. That has to be A with 15%. So we'll shade in A for 24. Number 25. The table shows HDI value for a country in 2 years. They are saying what could not explain the change in the HDI value. HDI value considers gross national income. It considers life expectancy and education. So it includes B, it includes C, it includes D. What it does not include is gender equality. And so for 25, we'll shade in A. Number 26. Which combination of statistics is used to calculate the natural population growth of a country, which is birth rate minus the death rate? So it has to be B. For 26, we'll shade in B. Number 27. What will increase the level of specialization in an economy? We are talking about specialization. We are focusing on a particular skill set, right? A computer manufacturer takes over an advertising company. A, so this is conglomerates or this is diversification. A retail store issues its own credit card. So this would be talking about uh, vertical integration. C says a travel agent provides transport to the airport. D says a vehicle assembler reduces its range of vehicles. Yes, this is why, because he is narrowing down his range of vehicles to focus more on, so he's specializing only in particular vehicles. So for 27, it has to be D. C is talking about vertical integration. This is also vertical integration. So it has to be D. So for 27, we'll shade in D. Number 28. What might an economist consider meant by the term dumping? Dumping is where foreign firms sell products, export goods at a price below their cost of production, right? So foreign firms exporting products at a price below the cost of production. B says foreign firms producing goods at a lower cost than domestic firms. No, all are incorrect. It's only foreign firms exporting products at a price below the cost of production. Why? Because they aim to seize the market share in the exporting countries. So for 28, we'll shade in D. 29. In the diagram, D is the demand curve for Chinese yuan and S is the supply curve. This is the initial equilibrium. If the central bank wishes to set the price at P1, this would be the demand and this would be the supply, and this entire region would be the excess supply. So in order for this excess supply, the government would have to buy this difference from X to Z UN. Why? Because if it does not buy this excess supply, the price would fall back to P. So in order to prevent it from falling to P and to remain at P1, the government would have to buy, the central bank would have to buy this shortage, this excess supply, this gap, this highlighted area of XZ. It has to buy XZ yuan in order to stabilize the price of yuan at P1. So for 29 MCQ number, it has to be B. Last MCQ for today, 30. The table shows the values of the items in the current account in 2 years. They are asking us how did the value of the net secondary income change between year 1 and year 2. So what we'll do is we'll add in the value of all of these and we'll equate it with the current account balance. Year 1, year 2. In year 1, we'll add in the balance of trade. We'll add in, there was a deficit in the net primary income, there was a deficit in balance of trade. Net secondary income we do not know. We'll put it in X, and the balance of current account was, again there was a deficit of 50. So it would be a negative 50, the deficit of 50, and then you will add it up, you'll get a positive 10. So this was a 10 positive. For year 2, again it will be a 0, negative 20, and then an X, and then you will equate it to 10, and finally X value you will get a $30. Now they are asking how did the value change. So a 30, it rose to a 30, it was initially 10, so it increased by a $20 million. So for 30, you'll shade in C as the correct response. I hope you understood how I calculated the value of net secondary income in this last MCQ. Stay tuned, subscribe to my channel. I'll be coming up with more solutions for this 2025 series. Happy learning. Take care.